Hello, this is the Everyman Can podcast based on mental strength, how we can use it in our everyday lives, interviewing local people, using their experience, their wealth of experience through their personal journeys and their own professional journeys, how they use it for themselves, how they use it for the people, and hopefully you can take something from it. We hope you enjoy. Hello, how are we all doing?
Hello.
Welcome to the newly branded Everyman Can podcast with me, Matt,
Richie
and Matt.
And today our guest is a female who I was introduced to this year. I understand you've known a lot longer, Richie. Amanda Chalmers. How are you, Amanda?
I'm really well, thank you, and glad to be here.
Good. So, Amanda, you have quite an extensive background.
I do.
So, Amanda's background is in psychology and effective communication. She has hands-on experience of working with offenders in both prison and custody settings and uses therapeutic and psychosocial interventions to support people to make change. Amanda, you also specialise in acceptance and commitment therapy, DBT and IEMT. You've also worked in school settings supporting children with special educational needs, and your latest role is on the implementation of trauma-informed care, which I have a massive interest in adult services within the South Tees of England.
Yep.
And this project is stretched across 2 council areas, including 2 drug and alcohol services, 2 domestic abuse services, adult social care and housing, and you've also pioneered an innovative trauma-informed champions training package.
That's right. I've been very, very busy over the years, very busy, but lots of experience in lots of different areas, all with people, because people are my passion and helping people, really.
And that's ultimately what we want to hear about. So we're going to ask you a question, Amanda. We're going to open up with every guest with this question. So what does mental strength mean to you?
So that question, when I think about mental strength, what I think about, the word that comes into my head straight away is resilience. To be mentally strong, you need to have been able to build resilience. A lot of the people that I work with in the work I'm doing right now, in the work I've done in prisons and custody suites, haven't got that beauty of being able to build resilience because they've had lots of toxic stress in their lives and they haven't had the support networks in place to be able to help them build resilience.
Right.
Which, when we talk about resilience, it's sort of, well, what does that mean? That means coping strategies and ways to get through the bad times in life. So as humans, and I always used to say this, particularly to the men in the prison, and I do use it every now and then in the work I'm doing now, is as humans, we're supposed to feel the sad as well as the happy. But as humans, we'll go, oh, but I just want to be happy. No, you've got to be sad as well. You've got to feel the bad stuff to be able to appreciate and feel the good stuff as well. So I always used to write sad and happy on opposite sides of a piece of paper. And I used to hand it to the men in the prison, the side that said sad. And I used to say to them, if you never want to be sad again, rip that piece of paper up. And they go to do it, looking at me a little bit like, well, what's going on? And I'd turn it around and say, but you're ripping up happy as well. You've got to feel both. And that's what people don't understand. And I think if you've never been taught how to cope with the bad stuff, so loss, trauma, just the bad times that as humans we do feel, if you've never been taught how to deal with that, you're not building resilience. And then unfortunately what people tend to do, and a lot of the people that I've worked with, they use sort of maladaptive coping strategies like substances to help them cope with it, which is very, very sad because you don't just wake up one day, particularly if you think of heroin users, and go, do you know what? Really good life choice today. I'm going to use heroin because that's going to put me in good stead for the rest of my life. They don't. They just need to somehow block out the pain. They need to somehow fill that emptiness that they've got inside of them. And they've got no resilience, no coping strategies within them to be able to do it. So when I think about mental strength, and what I always used to try and teach people was it's about coping strategies for the bad times so you can get through the bad times and be stronger for it and then enjoy your good times. So I used to teach all sorts of coping strategies, a lot of grounding techniques, a lot of distraction, a lot of mindfulness, a lot of acceptance stuff about sometimes we've had bad things happen. We can't go back in a time machine and change it. But what we can do is learn from it and grow from it. And that's what I used to do a lot of.
What a great first answer.
I know, I mean, it's interesting. So you're sort of saying it's about knowledge and it's about applying the knowledge. It's mental strength, actually. So would different, do you think different people, whether it's like men you've worked with, would have different levels of sort of mental strength at different points in their lives based just on the knowledge, or is there other things that come into it as well?
I think with men, it's a particularly difficult one. And I think it'll come to a question that you've got later on. But with men, it's really, really difficult because men, it's ingrained in them that men have to be strong. Men shouldn't cry. Men have to just crack on with life and it's okay. And frequently, particularly in the prison, I would obviously be in a room with an offender, sat trying to do some work with them. And because of how I work in the trauma-informed way that I do, so I made them feel safe. They knew that it was confidential unless they were going to hurt themselves or somebody else. And it's just that compassion that they could probably feel from me that I really wanted to help them. They would frequently break down in tears. And it was lovely because actually it's the first time they'd probably disclosed what they disclosed, and it's probably the first time that they'd broken down in tears about it and let it all out. And I just used to sit with them and say, that's okay. It's absolutely fine. Like, please just cry. You're in a safe space with me. Nobody can see. Nobody's going to know. Just crack on because you'll feel much better for it. And they did. And I think for men, it, you know, if they've been pushed to just be tough, and the word we use, isn't it, is man up. Mm-hmm. Like, man up, you'll be fine, which is just ridiculous because we're all humans, men and women. I think they've been pushed to do that and not actually taught from the get-go coping skills to cope with the bad stuff, and that crying is okay because that is actually a coping strategy. It's good to let it out. It's good to be angry if you can control it. That's okay too. So I think for men it's a difficult one, particularly. I think women have a better chance at it just because of how society sees women.
I think it's what really struck with me initially was you've got to go through bad times. And from my own experiences and stuff, you do build up that resilience and you do build up that. So when you have something that's hit you that's really bad, then something that you used to think was bad actually isn't anymore. And when you've gone through something as catastrophic as people go through, I suppose that resilience, then it allows you to, whenever something bad happens, it's not as bad as it was.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what I always think.
Absolutely. And I think it gives you an appreciation for what you've got as well. You know,
Massively.
and a good thing for mental health is gratitude and seeing what you've got around you. And I know I lost my dad nearly 6 years ago. And one of the things I'm grateful for every single day is that I wake up and I can appreciate the world. He can't. That got took away from him. I can. And I think so, you know, even though that was a really bad thing that happened, my coping strategy was to look at it in a really different way and go, okay, would he want me to just fall down and be no good to anybody or anything? No, he wouldn't. What he'd want me to do is stand up and appreciate everything he can't. And I think that's where our coping strategies come into place. But the unfortunate thing is if as a child, you're not taught that emotional regulation, you're not taught those coping strategies, and there's lots of toxic stress coming in from, you know, abuse, neglect, you know, household stuff that's going on. If there's nothing really good coming in and there's nobody to support you on that, that's where we get the chaos. That's where we get people who, you know, people see in the wrong way. You know, it's quite tragic really, but they've not been given anything. It's what they haven't had. And that's really difficult. And that doesn't put them in good stead for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and I think it's just crazy when you think of like men building that resilience. They won't cry. Mm-hmm. Or they'll just go that angry that it goes completely the wrong way. Then that has an effect on everything. They might get arrested. They might fall out with a partner, family, friends, whatever that is. But just to cry,
yeah,
it's quite simple, isn't it? And I've always been a good crier. I watched something last night and I had a good cry, but it is nice to cry and it is all right to cry.
I'm glad you finally got to see Barbie.
Yeah. It was all right, actually. But no, I think, because I know we've done stuff in the past around mental health, but to flip that around, how you turn that awful time in your life and what your head is going through into strength is fantastic. And one thing I'm really interested in, Amanda, is the work you did with men in prison.
Yes.
I mean, I'm coming out the police now after 18 years, and we in the police see probably another side to it where we don't get that chance to offer them the empathy that they deserve or need, or because it's quickly in and, you know, and then they go through the system. And I suppose once they're in prison and they've got that time to sit and reflect and speak to someone like yourself.
Yeah.
I imagine the first few meetings, and it might take months, it's hard to not break them, but it's hard to get actually anything out of them because they're just shut down. Yeah. So can you talk a bit more about that? Because it really it fascinates me how these tough men on the outside who have in jail for however long and have done this actually are really vulnerable and they are really soft inside.
Yeah. I mean, the majority of them. So on first meeting, I would be going to do an assessment, but I never really did an assessment as such because trauma informed, I don't like assessments. I knew the information I needed to get, but it was literally a conversation. And what I always tried to start it with was that safety. So they felt safe with me and taking that professional bit away of me. I was a human. So I used to talk to them about what's normal. And I used to say to them, do you think I'm normal? And they used to go, yeah. And I go, but what is normal though? We're all normal for our experiences, our upbringing. You're normal for you, I'm normal for me. And I used to just try and take away that professional sort of bit of me and make me human. And it was amazing then as to how they let me in very quickly. Because I think they were sat in the room with somebody they could see really cared and really wanted to know what was going on and that I could help them with it if I knew. So they would talk to me about all sorts. I mean, I've heard some horrific stuff, really and truly. And it's tragic what they've been through. And then, they get into this cycle of substance use, which takes them to criminality. They're normally growing up in sort of deprived areas where there's gangs or there's that type of criminality going on where it's normalised. And they don't know how to get out of it. They don't know how to get out of their own heads. And it's really, really sad.
And I suppose probably you're potentially one of the first people in their lives who genuinely cares.
Yeah, and this is the point. And do you know what I used to do for them as well? So because they knew that, and I did care, I cared 110%. Every single man on my caseload, I did what was right for them, not what the system asked me to do. So systems frequently are not human. They want ticky box answers. And yes, I gave the ticky box answers, but my main aim was the human that was on my caseload and doing the best I could do for them while they were in prison because they weren't chaotic. They were in a place where I could do some really good work with them. So what I used to try and do is never overpromise anything either because they were normally let down in life. Everybody had let them down, whether that was even services just pushing them away because of the behaviour, but the behaviour was because of what had happened to them.
Yeah,
they weren't
you can't
just
condone the behaviour, but
no.
at the same time, there's the action of the behaviour.
Absolutely.
As said before, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I used to say to them, what you've done isn't good, and that's why you're in prison. But I understand that what happened to you has brought you to behave in that way because you thought at that moment in time, whether you were off your face on drugs or whatever, that was okay. A lot of it was desperation for money and things like that.
Did something happen in parallel with that? So when they started to open up, did they start to accept? Was there ever a block to accepting responsibility for what they'd done?
Yes.
Which then started, transgress as they opened up.
Yeah, we used to do a lot of focus on their goals set on their values. So if you think about your values as a human, if you've got a value of honesty, if you live by that every day, you're going to hit every goal if it's around honesty. Now, most of them, even though they were maybe thieves and things, one of their values was always honesty and loyalty because underneath everything else they were. So we used to set goals around that. And what I used to get from them was how sort of sorry they were, how guilty they felt, how much shame they brought on the families because they'd broken their own rules. They'd broken their own values. And when you break your own values, you feel guilt, you feel shame.
Absolutely.
And that's what came through when we used to set those goals. And I used to say to them, if you can live by your values and the goals that we're setting around them, then you're not going to go far wrong because this is you as a human. You've told me these are your values. And it was normally nanas who brought them their values. They talk very, very highly of their nanas. And we used to set them around those sorts of goals. And, I said to them, you won't break them if you're you. If you go out and be you, these are your values. It used to be quite empowering for them, I think. And what I used to try and do was help them with the guilt and the shame by the brain science behind why they'd done what they'd done. So if we think of adverse childhood experiences and brain development and the science in that, as your brain develops, if you've got adversity going on at that time, your brain's just surviving. It's not concentrating on developing. So there's significant changes in your brain. Your brain's not damaged. It's just adapting to your normal. So their brains would have adapted to fit their normal, which was normally chaotic, which means that they're going to have particular behaviours. They're going to struggle with things like problem solving, with things like timekeeping, all the logical things that we would do. They probably would struggle. So when they didn't go to appointments, in the community, probably not, because they can't problem solve even getting there, never mind getting themselves out and about and doing it. So I used to explain to them from the story that they told me as to why they'd come to where they were and how their brain science has probably dictated their behaviour in some ways. And you used to see this person as if a weight had been lifted off their shoulders, because all they've been told, excuse my language, is from being small, you're a little shit.
Yeah.
That's all you are. And I used to go, no, you're not. You're absolutely 100% not. You're just a child that had to survive. And you had actually really strong behaviours to help you survive, and that should be championed for you as a child, because look at you got through it. But I used to just see lots of lost souls, lots of 40-year-old men who were still sat there as lost, frightened little boys.
There's a book I'm reading at the moment called Creating Freedom, and it talks about that it's a done deal on science, certainly in terms of where we draw a line for responsibility and blame. It's a lot further away in reality as to how the way that society acts.
Yes.
So we treat people as if they're responsible for all their actions, when the truth is that they're, those actions are dictated, as you said, by different brain science, different things that are going on within their head.
Yeah.
Whether it's trauma, whether it's survival, like you said.
Yeah.
It just means that in different set of circumstances, they would have made different decisions and done different things.
Yeah, but when we talk about mental strength and building that mental strength in adulthood, if you're told you're a little shit or a little bastard or you're fucking useless all your life, get the fuck out the house, you're shit, you're useless, you're going to do bad things or wrong things anyway, because no matter what, even if you do something good, you're still called a little shit and useless.
Absolutely. There's no reward system there.
So when you spoke about resilience earlier, their resilience, they haven't got any, because it's on the floor. And it's not just people who are in prison, I suppose, who are like that. There's a lot of people feel undervalued going through all their childhood, no matter what the background is. And that might be from anything from parents who were not there because they're working hard, seemingly providing the children with a good life.
Yeah.
But they're never there, they work away, or, and I suppose it goes back to childhood, everything does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You just want to feel a bit valued, don't you? And you want your parents to give you that resilience.
Yeah.
So when you're 14, 15, 16, it's like now I say to my kids all the time, if your gut is telling you, don't do it, walk away.
Yeah.
And if the people who are around you start having a go at you, you need to get them people out of your lives.
Yeah.
And I use an analogy, and I've used it numerous times, I think, on podcasts as well, where I say to them all the time now, and it's the same with adults, I suppose, people coming out of the prison, you're going to get rocks put in front of you.
Yeah.
And if you pick up that rock and think, meh, it's not worth looking at, but if something piques your interest, put the rock in your pocket and take that rock with you and the idea that's on the rock until you've seen it to the end, whether that be good or bad. And that's building up resilience. It's building up life skills that these people are getting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I used to say to them, it's not about mistakes. If we didn't make mistakes, we wouldn't learn. But if you don't learn from your mistake, then you're making a choice. And that's different. So it's about using your mistakes, using everything that's gone in before and learning from it. And there is something called trauma growth, where you can use your trauma to grow from it in whatever way that is, whether that's putting back to something that, was around what your trauma was, or, and people have done some amazing stuff from that, but also going back to what people haven't had, and that worthlessness, that hopelessness, that helplessness, that comes from something called the attachment theory. And that's where caregiver and child, it's that bond that you have as a very, very young child. And if your caregiver isn't giving you what you need as a child, then you're going to feel unfulfilled. You're going to feel that sort of hole there where you just don't feel worthy of it. So secure children normally have had that bond, they've had that sort of upbringing where parents are emotionally there for them, so they feel okay about it and they'll go off and explore because they know they can come back. But a lot of the people that I work with, it's what they haven't had, and they haven't had that type of caregiving, so they feel that They feel like they're not worthy of love. They feel like, you know, they're not worthy. And if they feel like they're not worthy of love from the very beginning, their belief system will be that. So when they come to work with professionals, they don't believe they're worthy of that help. And their reward system is maladaptive. So what they also think is, what do they want off me? If they're going to be kind to me like this, what do they actually want back? And there's all of that going on for them as well. So you put that together, and that's why sometimes it's really hard to engage people in work.
Yeah.
Which is why trauma-informed care is so important, and practicing in that way, because it's about making them feel safe and being able to trust you.
So did you see? Obviously, there'll have been success and non-successful stories coming out of it, but did you see? I mean, I suppose put it in a percentage. What percentage where you worked with them and managed to build up their mental resilience to a point where they had coping mechanisms and they had that ability to go back out into the big bad world and use them skills that you've given them?
I would say that 99% of the men, if they were invested in working with me, you got the odd person that wasn't invested in it, they weren't ready, they weren't there, and you have to accept that as well. When people are not ready, they're not ready. But a lot of the men were dealing with anxiety. And I'd give them really easy coping strategies. I taught them about the vagus nerve and how, even just cold water on the head in the showers would really help raise the tone of it and make them feel better. And there was one guy who was having massive panic attacks. He would have like numerous panic attacks in his cell every day. And I gave him just that about like, even in his cell, he had water. Just splash your face with cold water when you feel your panic attack coming on, and it'll calm you. And do you know what? We got his panic attacks right down.
Really?
Yeah.
Just through cold water?
Yeah, just through that. So if they're invested and they want to work with you, then lots of grounding techniques work for them. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can taste, 1 thing you can smell. That worked amazingly, and I used to do that as soon as they came in the room, because you could see the legs were going, they weren't in their window of tolerance, which is their best engagement area to do work with me. So I'd do that straight away with them. Some of them knew because I'd done it every time with them. Some of them didn't. But when I'd done it, I'd go, do you feel okay now? The legs had to stop moving. They were much calmer. I'd go, right, okay, we can work now. So I was teaching them these strategies without them even realizing I was teaching them so they could go out and use them. Now in the prison, they did. The unfortunate thing was you take them back to society and they haven't got my support network, and they're going back out to the usual sort of area that they came from, back out to the usual behaviours. And they go back to, you'd like to think though that they did learn something and they would use it if they needed to. If they did, I don't know. But what I did do is there was people that came back into the system, and I'd go and see them go, right, and they go, oh, Amanda, man, like, and I used to go, it's all right, like, okay, you back in, but what did you learn? Let's look at what you've learned, and let's look at how we can give you even more. So next time when you go back out, it'll be better. And there was a couple of guys that kept coming back around, and I used to keep getting them back on my caseload because of the work I'd done with them. And I would say that every time they went out, they were more resilient. They were learning from it, and they were coming back in because this has been a long time of criminality for them and this type of life, so it's hard to change. But they would learn something and they were getting better from it, and you could see them progressing and looking well, and they would started going to the gym and looking after themselves physically and just taking a little bit of pride in themselves, and that was massive. You can't win them all, but if you can sort of make a little pathway with some of them,
absolutely,
and some of them take one thing from you, then that's worth it. It's amazing.
Now then, we hope you're enjoying the pod. Just a little break to tell you about Every Man Can. You can find us on your usual social media platforms. You can find the podcast on wherever you get your podcasts from. We don't care, as long as you listen to it, you enjoy it, you get something from it, and you pass it on to your mates. Enjoy the interview. Let's get back to it. So, Amanda, I think a lot of people would be quite intimidated working in the prison.
Yeah.
I think I've been inside prisons, and it's not a pleasant place, is it? But I suppose when you can gain the trust of people and you become that one person a week who they look forward to seeing.
Yeah.
It must be a fantastic feeling for you. Forget them.
Yeah.
A rewarding thing for you. And I suppose when we talk about mental strength and resilience, you were hearing things that nobody really should hear.
No.
Some of the stories. you know, and when you work in that world,
Mm.
you hear and see stuff that would blow people's minds. And what really interests me from when I first met you was I spoke to you about a passion I have around workforces and individuals within workplaces being looked after.
Yeah.
So it falls probably into your trauma-informed
Yeah.
world that you work in and that you practice. So when you were coming away from the prisons, that trauma that you've built up, you obviously have an understanding of when people are dealing with other people who have traumas, and it's a daily grind. And I've witnessed it from a personal point of view quite a few times and quite recently. How do you work with people who are witnessing and seeing that sort of stuff every day and trying to support people because they need support, don't they?
Oh, 100%. Like, if you're not resourced to deal with the people that you're working with, how can you even do a good job? You can't. So I was always very aware of that with me. But I think with me, because I give out kindness, when I was seeing results and getting stuff back, that for me just filled my resource up. I went out of there feeling fantastic because I knew that in that day I'd helped, half a dozen men just to feel better for that hour. Even if it was just while they were sat in a room with me and they got a little bit of kindness, that for me made me feel all right walking out of there no matter what I'd heard. But you're right, there's empathy fatigue and there's vicarious trauma. And when you're working day in day out, if you're the kind of person who's compassionate and you're giving out that empathy and that compassion, you're going to unfortunately absorb trauma when people are talking to you about it. And I think one of the things that startles me, I talk about this in training and in other sort of presentations I do on trauma-informed care, because people aren't aware of the signs and symptoms themselves. So it's that thing, and I've seen it in the prison where people just numb to hearing the stories. They'll lock themselves in the office and do office work and make excuses to not go out on house blocks to see people because they just can't do it anymore. They've heard enough. It's that thing of, the boundaries get a little bit diminished and you do too much for somebody. It's that thing of trying to rescue and, those fantasies of, oh, it'd be all right if I can just do this, and then feeling really guilty and bad when you can't. It's all of those sorts of things that people don't understand as signs and symptoms of vicarious trauma. And a lot of companies who deal in this kind of work have employee schemes where people can ring and there's counsellors online and stuff, which is fantastic, but people don't use them because that type of information sometimes gets back to managers. So we were lucky in the prison where we had a psychologist come in and we did reflective practice once a month, which meant we could go, and if we had to talk about something, we could. Some people bought into it, some people didn't. But I think it's important for people to understand how to look after themselves. And I talk a lot about that. I use a lot of the grounding stuff. I talk about self-soothing a heck of a lot, because self-soothing, when you go home on a night and you're in your safe space and you close that door, it's about what can I do to raise all of those good endorphins in my brain, my serotonin. What can I do? And what you can do is fill your senses with everything that makes you feel happy. So what do you like to look at? What do you like to listen to? Your favourite song and have a dance about, or go for a run and put your headphones on. It's about, what do I like to taste? What I'm going to have for tea? Is it going to be my favourite thing? Do I like a cup of tea and a biscuit when I get in? Touch, it's like cuddling your kids, cuddling your dog. Having a nice warm bath and putting your favourite pyjamas on. It's all that sort of stuff that just makes us feel better. And it's really simple, but people don't know it. And what you don't know, you don't know. So people don't practice it. And I think it's important that a lot of organisations get on board with all this kind of stuff, because they're asking people to help people and support people, but then there's no support there for staff.
Absolutely.
Just come a bit close to your mic there. For me, I'm thinking about the prison thing, and I'm thinking, well, you mentioned about systems.
Yeah.
We're getting onto it, aren't we? So yes, people can protect themselves by doing things that are good for them. That make them feel better, release those endorphins, give them their daily dose, right? But the system, we've got a whole system out there in terms of like things that happen that for a lot of people are out of their control, and they just happen to them. And it could be politically driven, it could be the way that prisons are actually run. And I was reading about Norwegian prisons have the lowest reoffending rates, right? You've worked in the system, you've worked within the system and sort of broken the rules to a degree by the sounds of it. I like that. I'm on board with that.
I'm a bit of a rule breaker.
No, it's good.
It's about the human though, isn't it?
That's right. It's not for the sake of it. It's actually, why don't we have those? Why don't we take a lead from those countries that are doing it better? Do you think?
I think this goes up to government level. It goes, you know, we punish those that have been punished the whole of their lives. So what we do is that belief system they've got of not being worthy and not being being helpless, so people won't help them and I'm a little shit, that is impacted again and again and again, and we punish them. And it's supposed to be rehabilitative, but it's not. And I've witnessed it. It's really not. And when people behave towards people in the way that they've always been used to, they will behave and retaliate in the way that they've always been used to. And it's really, really sad. And the answer is it comes from government level. And with the trauma-informed care that I'm doing, I mean, when I left the prison, some of the men weren't very happy with me. And I said to them, right, I can only work in the way that I'm working with 60 of you on my caseload. What I want to do is take this out into the community and make this a bigger thing so that more people understand it, which means more people will work in this way, more people will be helped. Luckily, this job came up and I am. And I just think if I could get to Westminster and I could shout from the rooftops about what they need to do when they're working with humans and stop the ticky box stuff, stop all these, we'll give these figures to it because that looks really good for us. But that humans still just existing in the way that they are. And they're still going round and round in drug and alcohol services and they're still going round and round in prisons. Is that working? It's really not. The whole system, mental health and everything is broken. And it needs to be taken right back to the beginning and people to sit and give it a long, hard look and look at Norwegian prisons and look at the way that other people live. ACEs in places like Sweden, so adverse child experiences, 4 or more, and you're more likely to end up in these sorts of systems with physical health problems. They have really, really low percentages of 4 or more ACEs. I think it's something like 1%. When you look at our country, you're talking about 14, 15%. There's the difference. So why aren't we looking at that? Because do you know what? To keep people in the systems means money in whatever way, shape or form that is. If you saved everybody and made everybody feel better, where would we be? Where would the pharmaceutical companies be? Where would government be? All the handouts that they probably get from people. They wouldn't get that sort of money gratification, would there? So it comes from government and it comes from the fact as to how we build our society and greed, I think.
So we're not giving our society then the tools to deal with their own mental strength, are we?
Oh, no.
We're not.
And, I am very vocal about that. Probably a bit of a rebel. I'm very brave when I come to speaking about stuff like
While
this.
we were interviewing David Icke there.
But if you're going to make change, nothing will change if there's not somebody who's brave and talks about it. And I'm really brave in saying that. I don't agree with the way that people are treating the systems. I don't agree with it. I'm criticised for some of the, the sort of methods that I use and the techniques that I use, but I can guarantee the work. Yeah. And I've seen it work and I've seen people move on from things. There's no evidence for love or kindness, but we know it works. We know people feel better.
I just think, do people want to see people rehabilitated and being functioning members of society, or do they want to see them continue to be punished? And I think that's the difference, isn't it? They want to. I think we perhaps have more of a culture of punishment.
Yeah.
The prisons are about punishment, which didn't even exist until Victorian times.
Yeah, but
and it's.
But surely you want a society that's got mental resilience, mental strength, right?
Yeah,
we do. We do. I say we, us four, and I can imagine a hell of a lot more other people out there as well wanting that. And just going back on, I'm listening to Amanda there talking about so many things. This is why I'm on this podcast. 'Cause all of the things that you're talking about, Amanda, is just what makes people tick. I love that. And just going a little bit back to what the government, that's probably another subject. I know Matty joked there about.
No, I agree with you.
It's obvious, It's obvious.
The whole David Icke, but I agree. It is obvious. And going back to why I'm on the podcast is I love what makes people tick. And I know we're talking there because obviously it's what you've done in the past with prisons. But for me, all of these techniques, going back to trauma, that's what I love. General public need it. I say general public, people that haven't been in prisons and have got families and kids and working, and we all need it. We
Oh,
all
yeah.
need this so
Yeah.
much. We do. Don't
We
you
all
think?
have struggles, don't we? Absolutely. I mean, I'm really well resourced, but I have moments in life where I have a downtime and I have to pull myself back in and go, okay, I'm all right. And I've got all of these things that I know I can do, but I'm human.
Yes.
And I think to be human, you do feel these bad times and you only know what you know. And I think until this type of stuff's available, like even auricular acupuncture. So I absolutely adore auricular acupuncture. I practice it and I love it. And everybody I do it with absolutely get something from it, whether it lowers their anxiety because it raises all the serotonin in the brain, or whether they just get a good few nights sleep to help them feel more resourced for the next day. For me, that is a gift. Like if I can give that to people, and I do, integral eye movement therapy, there's no evidence around it. It's like EMDR, which is evidence-based. I have used that and I've seen massive, like, unbelievable. I shock myself when I use it because people go, oh, it's gone, and they look for it, and I go, well, don't look for it, it's gone. And it's just, that's the beauty of the work that I do, is seeing somebody move on. So EMDR is your eye movement desensitization, and it's about the movement of your eyes, and it sort of moves about your brain really and looks for the emotion that you've got attached to particular memories. And what it does is it sort of detaches it puts your memories into your long-term memory, and you just feel better because your bad memories are not there playing in your head on your landscape every single day, because your bad memories are there again to keep you safe. It's reminding you as to what you don't want to do, because if you do that, that's bad because that's happened before. So a lot of the people that I work with lots of bad memories, their good memories can't even come forward. So trying to ask them about good times, they can't recall it because the bad stuff's in the way. So if you can do integral eye movement and get rid of some of that bad stuff and bring forward the good stuff, they'll feel better just with that.
I underwent that last year, quite a really intensive period, and I didn't understand it at first, but it worked wonders for me.
Yeah.
Right.
And I still use it, techniques from it now when I'm in bed sometimes.
Yeah.
And I still use techniques that were given to me, and it honestly, whilst I was having it, it's the most I'd cried ever in my life, and it just comes out. The tears were just straight, and it's crazy, like how just moving your eyes is like.
Good. We should be doing it.
But it is. I speak very highly of it. It worked for me, brilliant.
Yeah, because it does bring stuff back because it's supposed to. With the integral eye movement, it's quite a quick way of doing EMDR, and I've seen, if I've done like 3 times, I've seen somebody crying really painfully because it's brought something back. Then the second time I do it, it's always this girl I did it with. It was like a real change of tears, and what it brought back is something good that happened at that point that she'd forgotten because the bad stuff was and she went, oh my God, like I'd forgotten that was a nice ending to what actually was awful. So then the next time I did it, it was gone, and she was like, there was nothing, no crying or not. She was gone. It's pretty amazing stuff. And
we had a survey with the Wellbeing Network members, and over half of them, there was a number one result with this survey was asking them what health topics they wanted to see more explored. And top of the list was well-being alternatives to clinical mental health stuff. And this is where this falls into. This is sort of like techniques for me that with a little bit of support people can do. There's a lot of techniques similar to this that people can self-administer, like the tapping.
Yes, yeah, EFT, yeah. I'm not trained in that one, but I would say, you see, I don't like to call myself a therapist. I like to call myself a bit of a change coach. So if I can help people make the changes they need to move forward in life and stop being stuck. So I use a lot of NLP stuff. I talk about the unconscious mind and the conscious mind a lot, and all of that kind of stuff. I talk about the brain science to help people understand themselves as a human and how they work and why they behave as they do. I use integral eye movement a lot. I use All Pain to Go, auricular acupuncture. I'm getting training in Reiki very, very soon, and something called Havening. These are all really alternative therapies. And for me, what I'd like to be able to do, so moving into next year when I start working a bit more for myself, what I'd like to be able to do is when people have gone through all of the clinical stuff and tried it, and I've met people where they've tried it and it just isn't for them, and we've got to be mindful that as a human, there isn't one thing that works for everybody. So you can't put everybody into a bracket. So for some people, CBT works. for some people it doesn't. And I think what mental health isn't open to is the fact that some of this non-clinical stuff will work for people. And if it works and it moves them on in life, isn't that okay?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether it's evidence-based or not. The evidence is that person's moved on in their life and feels better. That for me is where I don't really care about the evidence stuff. I care about the human. So if a human comes to me and I can give them that gift, I'll give them that gift no matter what kickback I get or who wants to criticize it. Yeah, but they've moved on, so
Yeah.
I think there is a lot of good evidence for these type of approaches. So I don't think they're not coming from an evidence base. And some of them, like you mentioned there, auricular acupuncture is thousands of years old.
yeah.
There's been a resurgence, isn't there, of a lot of things like breath work, cold water therapy, returning to some of the ancient wisdom that we knew around well-being, which is obviously been, I'm not going to say hijacked, but to some degree by medicalized sort of mental health approach.
Yeah.
And it's what we need is all this stuff in balance, don't we, basically?
Yes, absolutely. And available to more people. And it's not. I mean, my champion scheme that I'm doing, the Trauma Informed Champions, the great thing is I've got 16 of them out in South Tees in services where they have these techniques at their fingertips. I've got another 22 coming along very, very soon to be trained. And hopefully next year, I've got the dates there. I'd like to think we get another 22 before I finish this project in March 25, which means, we're going to have, almost 60 people out in services who have got these type of skills at their fingertips for those who hold trauma and where trauma is really holding them back in life and causing them all the chaos that they're in. I've also had about 20 people trained across the services in auricular acupuncture as well. So that is something that is available to people out there. So I am trying to bring it out there. I would say that it's a fight that I do fight frequently because, like I say, not everybody is on board with it. Not everybody likes it. Some of the services don't want to use it, and that's okay. And I always say to the individual champions, yeah, but keep practicing it with friends and family because you don't know where your next job will be and you don't know who you're going to meet. And if you've got that skill as a human being, then keep a hold of it. Don't lose it just because your service doesn't want to use it right now. That's okay.
Amanda, I could talk, honestly,
Just scratching the surface.
it's unbelievable. I've got a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
So the first question, the second question that we've actually given to you is reflecting on your own work and experience. What do you think the most common challenges are that lead men to struggle with their mental well-being?
Yeah. I think I've sort of covered that really.
I think you have.
And it's that sort of thing as to men being brave, men being strong, men not crying, man up, all of that kind of stuff. That's from a young age and it's not helpful. Like I've got a 12-year-old son and I encourage him to cry. I encourage him to identify his emotions. And I think men are not taught to identify what they're emotionally feeling. So, then they're not, in sort of touch with their emotions as much. And sometimes if you ask a man what they're feeling, they might not know. And a lot of it is anger, but actually anger's secondary emotion. It's normally comes from frustration or upset or something like that. That's where anger can come from. So I think it's that men are not brought up a lot of the time to understand that what their emotions are and that it is okay to cry. It is okay not to be okay. And I always say that. I was working with a guy yesterday and I said to him, he was almost feeling guilty for having a few months where he felt down. I was like, no, but it's okay to feel like that. You are a human, like allow yourself to feel that feeling and go with it because that is perfectly normal. And I gave him some strategies to make sure it doesn't go too far so that he can control it. But I said to him, you have to feel that because when you get to the happy stuff and the good stuff, you won't feel that like you should feel it if you don't feel this bad stuff. So allow yourself to feel it. Men aren't spoken to like that, I don't think.
No.
I think they're expected to just crack on.
I agree. I think it's almost like it's more common for men to have it reinforced them as a certain way to behave. And I think you can see that with some women as well.
Yeah.
Where they've been brought up or they've been exposed to a similar type of thinking or a similar type of disciplinary regime in a family or whatever, where that's also the case of them.
Yeah.
So it's like, but I just think it's more commonly attributed to men. That's part of it, isn't it? But it's I would agree, and so are the evidence.
Get it out. It's okay to just get it all out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I condone getting those emotions out. And anger's okay. My little boy gets very angry very quickly sometimes, and I say, well, your anger's okay. I don't want you not to be angry, but what I want you to be able to do is to control it.
Yeah.
So you know when to stop, so it doesn't get out of control, and that's what I try and teach him. And it's, you know, it's getting boys at a younger age to understand what their emotions about, and it's emotional intelligence, isn't it? And if you think about the maturity of girls compared to boys, a lot of it is around emotional intelligence. Now, why is that? Is that boys develop later, or is that just the way that some boys are brought up?
No, I didn't get it. I didn't get it as a growing up. I just wasn't around that kind of thing. But having the mother of my son, basically, I was with for years, and she was trained as a clinical psychologist. So there was a lot of conversations and back and forth. It started to raise my sort of knowledge about it. And then when my friend died in a car accident, and that's when I got therapy. It just massively, it was like putting the accelerator on my emotional development, which didn't exist prior to that. And so everything was like, it was anger or self-harm, whatever it was that was going on for me. And it's like, but as soon as that developed, that's my journey. As soon as I started to open up to that, I remember walking out one counselling session thinking, bloody hell, why didn't I do this sooner?
Yeah.
10 million into thinking this is the direction to go. And it's huge.
Yeah, it's that first step of asking for help for men sometimes, and that's where, you know, that's where the brave thing comes in. It's brave for men to go, I need some help. I'm feeling quite mentally not good at the minute, and that's okay, and we should champion that.
Yeah, we should. Well, you've answered the last question, because the last question was going to be what's your advice to people, but I think as this interview's gone on, you've given everyone tools to do things. Amanda, well, I can't thank you enough. 45 minutes, and I think we could have done another 2 hours, really.
Right.
But I just want to thank Play Brew as well, as ever. This is the 3rd time they've hosted us for a podcast. Fantastic brewery in Middlesbrough.
Got it all. Seagulls, police.
Yeah.
Beer brewing.
Beer brewing.
Yeah, the noise in the background is the brewer's still here, still brew. I know, I'm starving. But to sum up, Amanda, thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go?
It's been a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me on the podcast. You know, it's been great, and I love talking about all this stuff, as you can tell. So I'm very passionate about it.
I've got one more, very quick one. What's next then? Beyond, what do you think? Where might you be in 5 years with this journey of?
Oh, what I like to think is, so the trauma-informed stuff will still be there, and I'd like to think I'm taking that out, further along the UK, because South Teeth finishes March 25, and I've already put something forward where I'd like to go part-time with that from January, because I want to finish the project, but I've got so much more coming in. So I'd like to think, sort of speaking in whatever capacity that is about trauma-informed care and about adversity and what that means, and a lot of one-to-one stuff. So the stuff that I've got with the change, the change coach, all that kind of stuff, and making that available to, the normal man on the street who really, really needs that sort of support, and making them feel safe that, it's okay to ask for help, and I'm the one that can give it to you.
I think sure whatever you do, Amanda, you're going to have a positive impact on whoever you work with.
I hope so. That's my aim.
Right. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening.